Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress with coverage of round 2 of the 2020 Candidates Tournament. And like in round 1, we're going to have a look at the highlights of all 4 games. These were the live ratings after round 1. I got this screenshot from the St. Louis Chess Club live coverage. After Ding Liren's loss in round 1 and Caruana's draw, there's now a 62-point difference between the top seed and his closest rival rating-wise. And because of Wang Hao's win, he now got in the world's top 10. Alekseenko won 1 point with his draw against Grischuk and is now very close to 2700. The standings after round 1 are very easy. Wang Hao and Jan Nepomniachtchi won, so they lead the way. Anish Giri and Ding Liren are at the bottom of the table. These were the pairings of round 2. I got this screenshot from the FIDE website. Caruana Alekseenko, Nepomniachtchi Grischuk, Wang Hao Giri and Vachier Lagrave against Ding Liren. The first game to finish was Jan Nepomniachtchi with white against Alexander Grischuk with black. Let's look at the highlights of that game. Nepomniachtchi played e4 and we're just going to look at the first 10 moves of this opening. It is the Berlin defense. And the variation we see on the board is the Berlin endgame, or queenless middle game if you want. It was Vladimir Kramnik's weapon when he played Garry Kasparov in the year 2000 in the World Championship match. And Kasparov was not able to break down Kramnik's Berlin Wall. Kramnik won 2 games with the white pieces and drew everything with black. He became the 14th official world champion thanks largely to this Berlin Wall. There are of course many variations of the Berlin. This one with h5 was called by Alexander Grischuk after this game as dull, boring and not interesting. Let's jump from the 10th move to the 24th move, where Nepomniachtchi played bishop d2 to c1, and after the game in his interview he rattled off another variation. He said instead of bishop c1 he could have played g4, and that's attacking the rook. Then black takes en passant, f takes, knight h6, king g2 and bishop d5. Winning an exchange because it is skewer, but white can also win an exchange with g4. The rook cannot go to h4 because then there is king g3 attacking the rook. So after g4 there is rook takes g5, bishop takes g5, f6, bishop takes, g takes and e6. This was the variation that Nepomniachtchi showed after the game. He felt that this looked quite drawish, and that's why he did not go for it. He also said he can go for rook d1 in this position instead of e6, and then black has to take the exchange back. King takes, rook takes pawn and rook d7. And Nepomniachtchi said that the king is stuck on the back rank and that this would give white some chances, but he did not really believe in it, and that's why he chose for bishop c1 on the 24th move. But even then he did not believe white had any advantage. Let's jump to move 29. King g2 was played by Nepomniachtchi. And here it was Grandmaster Ramirez in the St. Louis broadcast, one of the many broadcasts I followed in round 2. He said, why does white not play e6 like Kasparov did in the famous game against Kramnik in Astana in Kazakhstan in the year 2001, finally defeating Kramnik in the Berlin endgame 1 year after he lost his world title against Kramnik. e6 was an important move in that game. And I looked at this variation, knight takes e6 and then g4, rook drops back and then white can take on c7 because the knight is pinned because there's a rook hanging on e8 attacked by the 2 rooks on the e file. But king g2 was played by Nepomniachtchi. He decided to not play e6. Knight e6 was played by Grischuk. Now that move e5 e6 is no longer on the cards. And this game petered out to a draw. Let's skip a few moves. Let's look at the last moves that were played. Let's go to move 36. Rook d3 to d8. A lot of material comes off the board now. b4 was played by Grischuk. A pair of rooks was swapped. And 2 pairs of pawns was swapped. And rook d8. And after rook takes d8, both players agreed to a draw. White is going to take the rook on d8 and we have an opposite colored bishops endgame with 4 pawns each and there's nothing more to play for. So this game between the 2 Russians ended peacefully in a draw. The next game to finish was an America versus Russia clash. Fabiano Caruana had the white pieces and he played against Kirill Alekseenko. And also let's look at this game from the start. d4, knight f6, c4, e6. And we see a Nimzo Indian. And now Caruana plays f3, a very sharp line, dangerous for both sides. And Caruana said after the game, the upside was that I never played this before, so I knew he hadn't prepared this line for this game. d5, a3, bishop e7 and e4. White has a very strong center. That is the point of f3. D takes e4, f takes e4, and white has a very impressive pawn center. That's move 7. Let's jump to move 15, where Caruana played knight c3 to b5, threatening a fork on c7. Caruana felt that rook b8 should have been played here by Alekseenko, just to avoid losing material with knight c7, but rook e6 was played by Alekseenko. Caruana played bishop f4, a6, and now knight c7, forking both rooks. And the idea from Alekseenko was to now play rook e4, attacking the unprotected bishop on f4. Bishop dropped back, rook c8 saving the rook, and g4. And here Caruana felt that black had to sacrifice a piece, and Alekseenko did so. He took on g4 with the bishop, h takes, and knight takes. White has a piece, but black has 3 connected passed pawns on the king side as compensation. But those 3 pawns are all still at home, and they also have to protect the black king. Caruana said it was a comfortable situation for him, as he had a lot more time on the clock than his opponent and a good and very safe position. He said, I felt I had a nice advantage here, mainly because I have square d5 for my pieces. So the extra piece is really felt in this position. Let's look what happened. Bishop d3 was played by Caruana, kicking the rook. Knight takes h2, bishop takes e4, and knight takes f1. Queen takes f1, an original way to swap a piece and a rook. And now Caruana said this is a very important moment in the game. Here knight f6 should have been played by Alekseenko. Caruana said this is the only move to fight to stop white's pieces coming to d5. Because now black also has a piece covering that square. Bishop takes d6 was Alekseenko's choice instead of knight f6, and Caruana thought this was the losing mistake. He played knight d5, g6, queen h3, and here king g7 was played. Caruana showed that knight e5 is not possible because of knight takes e5, bishop takes e5, and now we see a nice tactic. Queen takes c8, you have to take back, and then a family fork. Very nice. King g7, knight takes c8, and white has won the house. A nice variation shown by Caruana. So after queen h3, Alekseenko did not play knight e5, he played king g7. King h1, knight e5, knight h4, h5, rook g1, and here bishop f8 was played. And another nice variation was shown by Caruana. If black had played knight g4 instead, then there is knight f5 check. Then king g8 has to be played, rook takes g4, h takes g4, and queen h6. Threatening checkmate with queen g7, so bishop f8 is forced. Then knight d2 e7 check, very nice move. You cannot take that knight with the bishop because of checkmate. And if you take with the queen instead, then there is knight takes e7 check, bishop takes e7, and the smoke has cleared. White has a winning material advantage. Nice variation from Caruana. Back to the game. Bishop f8 was played instead of knight g4, knight f4, knight g4, and now knight takes h5 check, giving the piece back to open up black's king's position. Caruana explained that all the tactics worked for him here. Let's look at the remaining moves of the game. G takes h5, bishop f5, bishop e7. Caruana took on g4, h takes, queen takes check, bishop g5, and queen h5, the last move of the game. Alekseenko resigned here. White is going to win the bishop on g5. And there's nothing black can do against that. Let's look at one example. If you try to protect it, then there is knight f5 check, king f8, queen h8 check. You're going to be checkmated if you try to save the bishop. king f7, a check, king f8, another check, king e8 only move, and then rook e1 check, and mate in 2, black can only give away his pieces by interposing them on the e-file. So after queen h5, Alekseenko resigned, and Fabiano Caruana had won his first game of the event. And shortly after the Caruana game was finished, the next game finished, it was Maxime Vachier-Lagrave with the white pieces against Ding Liren on the black side. We had a Spanish opening, and this is the position after the 18th move from white, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave, c2, c4. Something has already gone wrong for black. You cannot take that pawn, because then there is bishop a4 with a skewer, winning material. After c4 you can also not play rook f8 to make sure you will not be hit by bishop a4 later, because then there is c takes b5, queen takes b5, and this nice shot, knight takes e5, wins for white. Because if you take the knight, there is d6 check, a discovered check from the bishop. You're attacking that bishop, which will then fork these two pieces. It's a disaster for black. White's pieces are entering black's position from all angles. So Ding saw that, and after c4 he played knight f7 instead. But that cost him a pawn. C takes b5 is an extra pawn for white, and white is much better. Bishop a8 is a big problem piece for black. MVL called it dead for the remainder of the game. That bishop will not come to life. g5 and now knight h2, a move that really was praised a lot by the grandmasters in the live broadcasts, preventing all counterplay. And Vachier-Lagrave said, I'm just a pawn up. That was move 20. Let's go to move 32. Knight f3 to d2, and MVL thought this position was resignable for black, but he said he had missed the next move, which was rook d8. He had missed this move, but found a good continuation for white, which is d6. If you take with the knight, there is rook takes e5. Nice move. Because after knight takes c4, there is rook e8, and that is check. The bishop gives check to the king, so white is going to win that rook and will win an exchange in the process. After d6, Ding did not take with the knight, he took with the rook. Then rook b1 was played, and if you now play bishop b7 to block that pawn, there is knight e4 check with a fork, threatening to win material. So bishop takes e4, and then d takes e4, and Vachier-Lagrave called this domination from white. The two bishops, the b pawn, the rook behind the pawn. White is in the driving seat here. After rook b1, bishop b7 was not played. Knight d8 was Ding's choice. b7, that pawn was taken, and white did not give away that pawn for nothing. He played bishop a5. And that was the last move of the game. White wins a piece. The threat is bishop takes d8, and if you then take back, the bishop on b7 will be hanging. And there's no way for black to avoid losing a piece, and black's king is probably also going to be checkmated afterwards, said Vachier-Lagrave after the game. What a disastrous start for one of the pre-tournament favorites, Ding Liren. Who could have thought that he would start the tournament with 2 losses? MVL was a last-minute replacement for Timur Rajabov, but the fact that he did not have much time to prepare so far does not seem to have bothered him. He is one of the co-leaders after 2 rounds. And that leaves this game, Wang Hao with the white pieces against Anish Giri with the black pieces. That was the last one to finish, and it lasted 61 moves. We had an English opening, and this is the position after 12, queen d1 to c1 from Wang Hao, attacking the h6 pawn with 2 pieces. King h7 makes a lot of sense here. It was not played, and then Wang Hao said he would have gone for a move repetition with queen d1 and then maybe king g8, and this would have been a very short draw. But after queen c1, Anish Giri thought for 40 minutes and then played a move a7, a6, which he himself called after the game a disastrous move. Black should never waste the tempo with a move like a6, but he played it anyway. White took on d4, knight takes, and the game went on. That's move 14. Let's move to the 31st move, rook e to d1 from Wang Hao. Materials equal, but white is slightly better, and here Giri feared the maneuver bishop f1 to d3 to c2 and to b3, putting pressure on that pawn. And he said he started to panic here and played up his pawns on the queen side. He played b5. And he said, this way I only create a second weakness for myself. After the d5 weakness, black will also get a weakness on b5 now. After a3, rook b8, knight e2 and a5. Black pushing his pawns, but only will cause trouble for himself. Knight e4, bishop d7, b4. These pawns got swapped and now black has two weak pawns. Let's skip a few more moves. Let's go to move 39, rook b1 to c1. And here Giri decided to sacrifice a pawn to activate his pieces. He's not going to hang on to the b5 pawn. He played rook b to a7, and now that pawn on b5 can be taken. Wang Hao took it with the knight, bishop takes, and rook a3. White has an extra pawn and probably a winning position. The time control was reached. This was move 41. But Wang Hao was not able to bring the point home. Giri defended well, and I'll show you how the game finished. This is the 57th move, knight c4 to d2 check, and Wang Hao realized he could not win his position. He did not want to push the boat out too much. He satisfied himself with a draw after these moves. Knight e4 check, king f3, and a draw was agreed. So again, in round 2, like in round 1, we have 2 decisive games and 2 draws in a tournament table. The standings after 2 rounds. This screenshot comes from the St. Louis Chess Club live broadcast. Caruana and Vachier-Lagrave, Nepomniachtchi and Wang Hao lead the way. Half of the field is in joint first place with 1.5 points out of 2 games. Alexander Grischuk is the only player who made 2 draws so far. He's on 1 point. Alekseenko and Giri had a draw and a loss, and poor Liren. He's in a very tough situation with 2 losses in the first 2 games. Round 3 will be played on Thursday the 19th of March, and we'll see Liren against Caruana, Giri Vachier-Lagrave, Grischuk Wang Hao, and Alekseenko against Nepomniachtchi. I will be here after the round to tell you what happened. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up, please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel, and please leave a comment. I will read them all and I will reply to them all. If you like this video, please share it on social media by clicking the share button on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram, on Twitter and on Facebook. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.